The next little question I've got is interesting. It's a bit more of a technical one, but it sort of leads into a broader context. So the question is, what is an earnout and should I accept one? So an earnout is part of really a deal structure. So before I kind of get right into whether you should accept this thing, let's take a little step back and just give you an overarching concept of deal structures. So when you sell your business, you get paid a sum of money, right? Like the consideration that you get paid is typically going to be allocated in one or more of 4 different buckets. And I'm going to go through and just explain these buckets so you get a bit of a concept, because an earnout is one of those buckets. The first bucket is the one we all want. It's cash, and it's cash up front. You sign a contract, you either get paid on that day you sign the contract, or there's a small settlement period that might be 10 working days, it could be a month. But typically there's a little short period and you get the money, right? And once that money's in your hands, I know I'd much prefer it in my hands than somebody else's hands if I'm selling my company. So cash up front, it's the thing we all want the most in, and it's nice and clean. The second bucket is what I will call, it's deferred, but not at risk, okay? Another name for that is vendor finance. So you're the business owner, you're the seller, you're the vendor, right? So effectively, vendor finance is you're loaning some money to the buyer so they can acquire your company. Now, a lot of people hearing this might go, why on earth would I want to lend money to the buyer? I don't even know who they are. And that's a fair question. But look, vendor finance is a very common mechanism in small to medium businesses. And it's not like you're just lending them money and you've got no coverage or no security, right? There's usually a general security agreement in place. It's written through the contracts. And if they didn't pay you as and when you are due, then you can, in many cases, take the business back, or there are other ways for you to get protection for the money you're owed. And that's a real distinction here, right? It is a debt obligation. It's not sort of an equity kind of convertible note or some other fancy financial instrument. It's just a debt. They owe you the money. And so that's often a nice tool or mechanism within a deal structure that will help facilitate deals that otherwise won't get done, right? And I think that's an important distinction here. If you're a business owner saying, I will only ever accept cash up front, well, maybe you will get a deal, but you've probably limited that buyer pool significantly. And I guess the other aspect to that too is by allowing some of these other structures, you actually might get more for the deal as well. So let's keep moving. So cash up front, you've got vendor finance. The third one is an earnout. So in other words, the money is deferred, but it is also at risk. And by that I mean, typically there are some performance metrics that you will need to meet for you to get paid all or some of that money that is part of the valuation. A great example of this might be, and I'll walk through and give you a good an overarching example, but some of those metrics might be you need to hit a certain profit number or a certain revenue number, or it might be a combination of those kind of metrics. An important thing to note here too is that certainly in the deals we negotiate, rarely is that earnout an all or nothing number, right? It's never just black and white, you've hit it or you've not hit it. Typically there are ranges, there are thresholds. We put a range of options around that. So once again, I don't want to get too sort of technical with this, but there could be ceilings and floors and caps, collars, those sort of stuff where we say, okay, well, if you hit the number we all agreed on, then you get 100% of the number. If you don't hit that full number, you'll still get paid something. It might be proportionate. But also with earnouts, sometimes you can actually earn more than what you initially thought if you actually outperform the performance criteria that's been put in front of you. So earnouts, are they common? Absolutely. They're very, very common in small to medium transactions. Are they always present in every deal? Absolutely not. But I think it's important to understand that they are common, and it is, I would expect in many cases that a buyer will include that in the mix of deal structures they might put forward in an offer. Now, the fourth and final bucket is scrip, which is another way of saying that is shares in the company that's buying you. So you might swap some of your shares for some of their shares. I put this last because it's less common. It doesn't happen a lot. A little more common when you're coming along for the journey and helping them grow for the next number of years, or if you're being acquired by a listed company and they've got obviously as a listed company, their shares are actively traded on an open market, so you have a lot more liquidity. And so it makes a little more sense to be able to offer you shares as part of that total consideration. So now, a lot of that might be sounding a little bit technical here, 4 core buckets, but let's just walk through a really, really simple example for you. Let's just say for a moment that you sold a business for $5 million, and I'm just using a nice easy number so the math will make sense. A buyer in that example might say, look, we'll give you $3 million in cash up front, bucket 1 ticked. We'll put $1 million in vendor finance, so it's not at risk. You just need to turn up and do what you said you were going to do, and it's a debt obligation. And they might actually say with that $1 million, we'll pay $500,000 at the end of the first year and $500,000 at the end of the second year. So it's effectively a 2-year loan. Now, by the way, those loans sometimes do attract interest, sometimes they don't. This is all part of the negotiation. They might, with the final $1 million, so we had 3 in cash, 1 in vendor finance, there might be $1 million on an earnout, and that earnout period would typically, in a lot of cases, reflect the same period for the vendor finance, so it might go over 2 years, and you might need to hit certain revenue or profit targets each year. So $500,000 year 1, $500,000 year 2. Now, I'm not saying that's how all deals are structured. I'm just trying to give a simple example of how these buckets might be utilised in a way that is fairly sort of common. What is an earnout? Hopefully that's explained it. Should you accept an earnout? Look, the answer, like most of these things, is it depends, right? It depends on what the terms are. It depends on how much of the deal is on the earnout. It depends on how much risk you're taking. What I will say is that earnouts are a mechanism to minimise or manage risk. That's the only reason a buyer should even be suggesting an earnout, is because it's mitigating a certain risk that can't be mitigated in other ways. And so you need to ask yourself, A, can we mitigate those risks without that sort of type of structure? And if not, well, what's a reasonable amount of earnout, and what are the reasonable terms around that to mitigate the risk without you taking on more risk than you need to? So, a little bit technical there. Hopefully that's answered it at least a broad concept. Of course, if you've got more questions about that, and I imagine many of you will, feel free to reach out and I can get a little more specific for you.